Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi. Welcome to Press Club this afternoon. Name mi Wilmaraia Sinumila, mi moderator lo Press Club this session. Me really glad to look me full up in sta inside the room. Hemi show him say me got interest lo what nice to happen lo country me. Before me go ahead lo introduce more panelists me just want to introduce some topic for today. Our topic for today is diversifying Vanuatu's economy, prioritizing sectors beyond tourism and agriculture to ensure economic sustainability after natural disasters. In simple words, because that is quite long, in simple words, how do we prioritize where to start in the rebuilding of our economy after what we've experienced in the last 5 years, and most recently the 7.3 magnitude earthquake that struck our nation? The hashtag #YumiStandUpVanuatu hemi name series of events that will happen for the month of April, and this is one of the events that we're holding under the hashtag #YumiStandUp. The slogan, Speak, Act, and Transform, is relevant to where we are at as a nation. It reiterates the need to stand together and figure this out. Not just to talk about it. You may love Vanuatu, you may like the story and full up, but action I know happen. Yes? But we need to think about how we're going to prioritize our plans to see real transformation in our nation. I'd like to give you my definition of transformation. It's a result of a changed mindset, a realization that we cannot and must not remain in the status quo in rebuilding our nation. A recognition of intentional actions at a national and individual level to move out of our comfort zone and our complacency. A wise person once said, in every crisis there is an opportunity. What are the opportunities where we can find leverage? This crisis presents us with an opportunity to rethink our approach, reprioritize our strategies, and reposition ourselves. A personal key reflection is we are not alone. Hence, we've got panelists that are able to share with you their thoughts this afternoon. But there are also lessons learned around the nations of different countries, the globe, that we could use to leverage and help ourselves rebuild our economy. So without further ado, I have the honor of introducing our panelists this afternoon. Marla is a renowned economist who has given great advice in the Caribbean, and I'd like to introduce you to her this afternoon. I think you may have seen her on Straight Talk yesterday. If you haven't already, please make time to go in there. She's regarded internationally as a chief point of reference in regional economic issues, regularly advises governments and the private sector on improving and building up sustainable and resilient economies, and providing solutions. So we could learn a great lot from what she's experienced and what has worked in the small island nations in the Caribbean. Lisa Dinh, hemi woman place pliminomo, hemi Kamlo Santo. She's a Vanuatu-based advisor specializing in tourism and gender-responsive projects with a career grounded in social impact and inclusive development. She's the founder of T Global, a consultancy focused on delivering practical, locally driven solutions across the Pacific. She wears many hats, like many women in Vanuatu do, bringing a diverse range of experience, having worked across the public and private and also development sectors, and with multinational organizations, and she's also looking after their family-run business in Santo. She plays an active role in shaping tourism development at both national and local levels, serving as a tourism counselor on the Vanuatu Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Representing the Vanuatu Financial Services Commission is our commissioner of the VFSC, Branan Karae. He currently is serving his second term. So I am positive that he's done some positive things in the first term, and he's been appointed as the second term into the role of Commissioner of the VFSC. He joined VFSC after 20 years with the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu, also doing work in the US with the IMF. So there's quite a bit of experience there as well. Most recently, just to mention two of the notable achievements during his tenure as Commissioner for VFSC, is to ensure that there were VFSC presence throughout the provinces of Vanuatu, and also recently passing the virtual asset service providers in collaboration with the key stakeholders. Finally, representing our monetary and fiscal policy influencers and makers, the guardians of our economy and financial sector, the regulator of the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu, we've got Dr. Michael Hililan, and he's here as the acting Governor of the Reserve Bank in his absence. In the interest of time and order, I've actually requested that we get right into the questions so that you will also have some time to ask your questions. As previously alluded to, Vanuatu has seen its fair share of challenges in the last 5 years. We've experienced political instability, a liquidated national airline, twin cyclones, and most recently the earthquake. We have really been through a lot. We have seen the cost of goods to retailers increase, the increase in prices to our consumers, the general cost of doing business in Vanuatu also increase. And then to top it up, we've got the trade wars that are happening with US, placing some tariffs on exported goods. So my first question will be addressed to Dr. Michael. The Reserve Bank plays a very vital role to promoting monetary stability and fostering financial conditions that are they're conducive to growing our economy. What fiscal or monetary policies can be or have been implemented that will stabilize the economy in the short term as we recover while fostering long-term economic resilience? Thank you, Dr. Michael.
Thank you very much, moderator. And I'll probably talk about the traditional role of the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu as a central bank, probably to set the scene first, and then what the Reserve Bank has done in response to the crisis that we have at the moment, and how it's contributed to what you're doing here in terms of Yumistanap Vanuatu, Yumistanap, hashtag. But the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu is the central bank of Vanuatu, and it has and wears several hats. First as a regulator, and in that role, it also contributes to stability of the financial system in Vanuatu. How it does that is that it regulates the domestic financial sector. It licenses institutions in the domestic financial sector, and then it supervises them, so that we as Vanuatu and who have placed funds in the banking system, in the financial sector in Vanuatu, can be sure that they are safe. That then translates to stability in Vanuatu. And that is an important function of the Reserve Bank. Within this also, it addresses issues on what is called AML-CTF, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, to ensure that the jurisdiction of Vanuatu is safe. And it does a lot of work in that aspect, and to ensure that we are safe. Now, related to this is the fact that Vanuatu has been blacklisted, and we have been de-risked, which means that correspondent banks that will deal with overseas are hesitant to deal with our banks. And so after a while, the Reserve Bank stepped in that role in its anti-money laundering policies. It works with partners, it works with regional central banks, and to address this. So that's its regulatory role. And in terms of its monetary policy role, the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu, as you know, is responsible for monetary policy. That means that it controls money and credit and interest rates in Vanuatu in such a way that we stabilize prices in the economy, inflation in the economy. As you've seen, inflation, when we have shocks, and Vanuatu is highly vulnerable, one of the highest in the world. We've had shocks, so many shocks. And I can, from 2015, we've had several, I think, Category 5 cyclones. We've had just a devastating earthquake. And so how do we respond to that? That is through monetary policy. And it's also, recently, it's gone out of its way, really, in terms of what used to be non-traditional central banking roles. And so it's adopted financial inclusion as of one of its important mandate. And we found that financial literacy in Vanuatu among our people, especially in the rural area, especially in sectors like the agriculture sector, the MSMEs, micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, are quite lacking. And so we stepped in with a lot of partners here, with the banks, and tend to educate our people. We also find that as we use technology, that digital literacy is also low in Vanuatu. We need to address that as well for our people to then be able to embrace this economy that is now embracing technology. Our role is to stimulate growth. So we've seen a growth go negative in 2020, 2021, and it came back up. We forecast that this year it should be about 3.6%, our latest forecast, that's by the Macroeconomic Committee. We think it will be, it is reviving, but we need to keep that on track. So how is the Reserve Bank responding in monetary policy to this growth outlook?
Yes, and I think that's probably where the question is. We've just come out of this earthquake. You've explained clearly what the role of the Reserve Bank is in terms of stability and ensuring that their policies to help with the stability. But I guess the immediate action, or maybe some of the proposals, or what you're working on at the moment as the Reserve Bank, for some of the business houses in the room, like representatives, what is the immediate action, I suppose, after the earthquake of December in terms of restoration?
Well, the first one is that, like I said, we control lending out there. And so what the Reserve Bank board did in March this year was to put everything on hold, because the Reserve Bank was on going to tighten policies. That means it was going to increase interest rates. But because of these shocks, it has had to hold back on these policy changes and to observe first as to whether we can generate growth first before we go further down that track. The other thing is that it's worked with the banks to kind of suspend its prudential loan classification that are affected by this shock, so that banks can be on a more sound footing to lend to the business sector. So then business sector can then be revived again. Part of this work is coordination with fiscal policy, I know. I'm not going to go down that track, but I'm just going to, I think I want to add something that what to your question, to the fact that what extra policies has the Reserve Bank envisaged or undertaken. One of these policy is because we are vulnerable, we have so much shocks, is to address things like micro insurance. We find that a lot of businesses are small, but they have limited access to insurance. And what we thought was needed was that we need this parametric insurance that can cater for small businesses. We've worked with one of the insurance companies in town, but because of 2 cyclones that recently took place, that didn't work out. And so we need to further work on this. But I think we're thinking of a parametric insurance also because given things like how do we reach out to people in rural areas? I know central banks are discussing things like central bank digital currencies. These are norms now being discussed. We need to examine that. We need to assess that, whether it's suitable for Vanuatu, and then we will go down the track or we won't go down the track. Also in response to technology, I know a lot of young people these days are into IT, ICT related businesses. And so we in the financial sector, we're looking at what is called a regulatory sandbox, where digital financial or digital innovations can be trialed, and if successful, can be piloted. Because if you let some of these things trialed, and you see or piloted, and you see how improvements can be done to it to protect our people, then you release it to the public. So some of these things, in response to both technological advances, but to being vulnerable to so many shocks, are being tried and are being discussed at this stage. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I think I will ask Marla. I mean, what a privilege it is to have someone who's actually been around, has experiences working with governments and also with natural disasters. Maybe you can help us out here and make some suggestions on potential solutions maybe the central bank could take or the businesses that are represented in the House. What are your thoughts on that? What could we go about doing as a country or as people?
Thank you, Wilma, for the question. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, Vanuatu. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and it's been a wonderful few days so far. Before I answer your question, I just want to say, in response to Mr. Michael talking about central bank digital currency, in the Caribbean, we actually have the most central bank digital currencies in the world. And of course, part of the reason why we have that, Jamaica has one, Bahamas has one, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union has one, Barbados has one. It's because we have similar problems like you do, where we have to take currency on boats from one island to the next, and it's a very difficult situation when you have so many different islands and different currencies within our archipelago. We have, I think, more than a dozen currencies in the Caribbean, so I'll be happy to help put you in touch with the central banks in the Caribbean. To answer the question, Wilma, we've, of course, in the Caribbean, had to deal with a lot of natural disaster crises, just like you have here. And there are 3 important ways to manage risk. And when I say risk, I mean not just climate risks, but even geopolitical risks, like we're seeing now with tariff wars and all of the policies being implemented by President Trump. One of the best ways to manage risk is, as Mr. Michael said, to have insurance. but not just as individuals and businesses, but even as a country to have insurance. So in the Caribbean, all of the Caribbean countries came together and created something called the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Fund, CRIF. It is the only one like it in the world, and it's a fund that all of the Caribbean countries that are members pay into this fund, and whenever a disaster hits, whether it's a storm, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's an earthquake, sometimes it's just a flood, it's not even a storm. The CRIF will basically give you money, and they have certain funds, like sometimes it's a rapid release one, you get it within 3 days, and then they have longer term ones for rebuilding of bridges and airports and things like that. So that's one possible suggestion. Countries like Vanuatu, Fiji, Samoa, you all can get together, and we have a template in the Caribbean. I'm happy to put you guys in touch with the CRIF people to understand how they did it. It's the only one like it in the world, and it works very well. So that's one thing you can do to manage risk, have insurance on the individual level, business level, national level. The second thing you can do to manage risk is to have something put aside for when things happen. So at a personal level, we understand this. If we have a piggy bank with something in it, when something goes wrong, I have a piggy bank where I can access some funds without borrowing, and I can use those funds to buy whatever supplies I need. So many countries have what is called a sovereign wealth fund. My country, Trinidad and Tobago, has the oldest sovereign wealth fund in the Caribbean. We have just under $6 billion in that sovereign wealth fund, which is about 6 months, 7 months of what we call import cover, meaning it will cover us for everything we have to import for about 7 months or so. And so that's one important thing. Having a sovereign wealth fund, no matter how small, is better than having none. When is the best time to plant a tree? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and today, right? So I think having a sovereign wealth fund, I've seen many countries benefit from having something put aside, even if it's a small amount, but it grows over time, so that when something does happen, you have access to these funds that you can help finance your recovery effort. And the third risk management technique or tool you can use is diversification. And I know that's one of the questions Ms. Wilma has for me around economic diversification. The problem with a small country is that it's very difficult to have tourism, financial services, manufacturing. It's very difficult to have many different sectors that are successful. Sometimes you can just, as a small country, do 2 sectors, maybe 3 sectors. I'm aware you have a thriving agriculture sector. I'm aware you have a tourism sector. Last night we visited a rum distillery, and so you have some manufacturing here. I think that having a few different sectors that earn money and employs people is also one of the mechanisms we can look at. And I think certainly there's a lot more opportunity in agriculture and in manufacturing here, as well as tourism. Of course, Ms. Lisa here, I'm sure she will talk more about that and knows much more than I do about that. But those are the ideas I think we've learned from in the Caribbean, and we benefit from. Another thing that helps during a crisis, and I guess is a way to manage risk, is having good friends. So having, as we call them in economics, development partners. So making sure you have a good relationship with your neighbors, so that should something happen, they're quick to respond and be nice to you. Whereas, there are countries that are not very good at being friendly, and they're left out in the cold when something happens. You don't want to be one of those, right? So it's always good to be good to your neighbors, so that together you can support each other.
Thank you, Marla. And those are 4 great points that are practical and can be taken away. So We thank you for the advice. We'll be picking more of your brain during this discussion. So we've heard about tourism and agriculture. They're main two sectors that we rely on as a nation. In the last 5 years, the tourism industry has suffered from the impacts of COVID-19 and the twin cyclones and the liquidation of the airline, and then just when we thought we were getting our head above water, the natural disasters. I'm pleased to be able to ask Lisa this question. With her expertise and experience in the tourism industry, what are your thoughts on how we can ensure the sustainability of tourism is a key pillar to our economic recovery, contributing both to environmental preservation, but also, as we touched on briefly, economic diversification?
Thank you, Marla. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to be on this panel with these great institutions and great panelists. And I've flown over from Santo, as Vilma was saying before. I'd like to start by saying that I absolutely love the theme of this workshop, Yumistanap Vanuatu. I like the action that's included into it. And the reason I'm saying that is we're talking about crisis. Crisis is almost business as usual now. We've had PAM, we've had COVID, we've got twin cyclones, we've got earthquakes, we've got man-created crisis. Unfortunately, I'm not saying these are here to stay, but they are here. And the longer we keep on talking about this, the less we actually have time to get into action. And I love what Ms. Marla just said. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and today. So really, with Yumi Stand Up, I'm hoping that we can move forwards with this dialogue, because right now, from a business sector, I've got my Chamber of Commerce hat on here, there is a sense of urgency. We cannot afford to wait any longer. The Vanuatu Chamber of Commerce had an economic conference last year in April, where unfortunately a lot of the issues that we are faced today were already addressed. Now they've just been amplified. I'm not saying that we've lost a year. What I'm saying is it's been a year where we could have accelerated and put into place a lot of different measures that really have to be made and have to be activated. So thank you to the organizers who are really impulsing this conversation, and I'm really glad to see institutions, great thinkers, but also doers in the room that can move this forwards. Now, how does tourism fit in all of this? Tourism is one of the quickest ways of getting out of recovery. Tourism is not luxury. Tourism is not about holiday makers. Tourism has a ripple effect on every single aspect of the economy. It affects the mama at the market, but it affects the mechanic that's fixing the taxi, of the driver that's going to pick somebody up. We're talking about getting the money into circulation. We're talking about micro businesses, medium and small enterprises. What is one of these sectors that is the richest and that is heavy in these micro businesses? It is tourism. So I really understand the conversations that are happening about diversification of the economy, and I will leave the experts define and decide how far we should go on diversification. But what I will say is this cannot happen if that means shrinking tourism. Why don't we go for the quick fixes? This is already here. But what is the complexity about tourism? Tourism is so transversal. It's so cross-sector. It affects finance institutions, it affects agriculture, it affects infrastructure, it affects education. It is so transversal that it is complex. There's no one quick fix to get it done, but it's really about getting on the table and starting somewhere. But I really want to insist on how important it is for actually reactivating this tourism sector. But this needs basics. And this basics will be infrastructure. Of course, infrastructure, I'm not going to complain about connectivity with the outer islands or with international markets, but there will be no tourist if there is no connectivity. The experience that we're selling them, which is this beautiful, pristine destination, but also a destination that is so rich on culture that is unaccessed if the people just can't get here. So this is where the sustainability conversation comes into this point as well, where sustainability is a lot of people in sense of urgencies and panic that we're having now, they're like, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But what I would like to encourage everybody to think is, actually, sustainability also happens now. It's how do we maintain this industry for the future? If we're selling beaches and beautiful smiles, we better make sure we've got beaches and beautiful smiles in 5 years' time. It's about being able to bounce up quicker from all these ongoing, unfortunate crises that we're having, but none of us in the room can sit here and say, these crises are gonna stop. So it's really about working with what we have. And then maybe the last point that I'll just tap on is about the narrative. Somebody in the audience asked me before, well, the flights are back into Port Vila. Why are they still not tourists here? And I'm saying the narrative is important. Crisis after crisis after crisis, people are not really conscious of what the situation is on the ground. They've lost confidence. The tourists have lost confidence, but so have the businesses. And after the earthquake, so many businesses have just been completely destroyed. Do we reinvest? Can we afford to reinvest? Can we maintain jobs? Can we not? That business confidence is fundamental.
Well, thank you for that very elaborate response, and I think we all agree. And this is why at the beginning of my introduction, I actually said it is probably time to retake stock, reprioritize, reposition. Because we can sit down and have this many conversations and have great ideas, but it is totally on every one of us in the room, not just the panelists, to take action. And it leads on nicely into a question that I'll ask Branan, because we know the main role of the VFSC is to administer the registry of companies. It also has the powers to regulate, monitor, and supervise the non-banking financial sector of Vanuatu. And protecting the public from loss and fraud, promoting Vanuatu as an international jurisdiction, and enforcing compliance. So Branan, in his role as commissioner and heading the Vanuatu Financial Services Commission, has a very challenging role because he has to promote Vanuatu as an international jurisdiction, but he also has to ensure that we are compliant. And we all know that the cost of compliance to every businesses, as Michael had spoken about earlier, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing, even us as individuals, you can't go into a bank without opening a bank account on the spot. You've got documents after documents to provide. Every time that we take costs money. It translates into some sort of cost for the businesses who are providing services or to the consumer who's standing in line in a long queue. So my question for you, Branan, is how can financial institutions support the growth of small businesses and entrepreneurs as a way to diversify the economy? Secondly, what are the strategies that the VFSC is developing to promote economy recovery?
Thank you, moderator, and good afternoon to all of us here. Privileged to be part of this panel this afternoon and basically represent the VFSC at this dialogue. Yes, it's very interesting. I guess Vanuatu is at the crossroad now. We were discussing before coming up here. We talk about disaster, but it's like every year we have all this disaster. And I'm glad that Marla came up with all these suggestions, and hopefully it will help us. For us, I think, as the moderator has said, our role is basically the non-banks entities and institutions that we register, regulate, to try to grow the business. So we have, previously it's just growing the business, registers of business, and then remitting the fund to the government. But with all this international compliance that comes in, we have been stretched with resources. May I say, our question is, how do financial institutions, when you talk about financial institution, you talk about Reserve Bank, you're talking about the banks, you talk about Agriculture Bank, you talk about National Bank, PFSC. These are the institutions that what do we do in terms of helping, business for us in terms of registration. So our call under the act that governs us is to collect revenue on behalf of the government. 75% of that goes to the government to support with the fiscal, and 25% is we held to support with the operations. So that is our prime role. But now we have to take on the responsibility of making sure that we manage and supervise institution in a way. So we have seen a change in the focus over the last 10 years. Unlike before, where we pride ourselves giving a lot of money to the government depends on us. We have to squeeze our purse in order to employ more supervisors, set up systems, and ensure to maintain the standards. So that is the big thing that the bigger picture. But I'd say overall is how to grow the business. From what we see now is addressing this issue about the blacklist and corresponding bank. I can sit in my office with my team. We can process the names and all this. It gets to the bank, this daunting process of a rigorous process of going through. And it's discouraging. You tell me to grow the business, and I give you the certificate. I try to improve the process, and you get to the bank, and the new owners get discouraged. So much question asked. ID, and you have to go this fit and proper and all this. Before, our parents, they don't do that. It's easy to do it. But the global business has changed, and that's the reality. We've listed in the blacklist, and that's why we are facing this. So I think my first point is basically all institutions, the financial institution, PFSC is part of the national coordinating committee responsible for AML, CTF, and which deals with all these policies that responds to FATF, EU, and all this. And many times we've seen members not attending the meeting. The people, the community in Vanuatu depend on us to be actively involved in those review so that we can prepare Vanuatu for the next assessment. Because if we do it very well, then our image is going to improve, and we start seeing opening up in corresponding bank cases, and the situation will get better. So when you get to the bank, if you come to the PFSC, open an account, you should be able to, feel much better to operate an account. So that is one of the things that we see. The other thing that PFSC is trying to spearhead is basically get the service to the people. I've mentioned in my short, background is in my last term, we managed to get PFSC presence throughout the province. That is basically, people in the village who have not access to that before are able to come and do their registration. Another initiative we've done is mobile registration. You just basically, with the internet access, you can just print the certificate, and then from where, in the farm or where, you can do that. So it's bringing the service. I know NBV has been big on that. They've basically, presence throughout the country. It promotes that environment of doing business. And I think that's very good. And also, we at PFSC, we try to review our products to see if, just to position themselves that will be able to help meet the needs of the business. Some of this, it's quite hard because it's required in the law, so you can't change. So we have to look at ways of doing new business. And for the offshore market, I'm pleased to say that recently, after going, say, around 2 years or 3 years, through the Future Asset Service Providers bill, we have managed to pass it in Parliament. This is new business that we're offering to the market, the global market. Previously, we had this Financial Dealers License Bill Act, which we have all these license holder, and Titan FX is one of them. Through their establishment and physical presence in Vanuatu, they have ripple effect on the economy. They'll be able to employ, they're able to rent accommodation, and I'm pleased to say that they've also provided opportunities for new Vanuatus. At the moment, the industry has employed over 100 plus staff, which is quite good, and this, as we go more to meet the physical presence, we will need more people in Vanuatu, and education is a very, very important thing that we need to invest in this area. I think one of the last point I want to touch on is just making access to the service. I think I've talked about the province, but we are working on a project now with the trade, with FIBA. We want to basically one-stop shop for registration, where FFC, the process starts with FFC, it goes to FIBA, customs and immigration. So you can track where you are going through the process of registration. We want to cut the process short. So you come to us, there's a big template there, you fill in your name, you don't have to go to the FIBA and re-enter your name and all this. You come to FFC, you put your name there, and then it shows that we are processing. Of course, we have other requirements that we can do, but already it gives an indication to FIBA that there is a registration that is happening. Once VFSC gives the certificate, automatically the processes kick in. You don't need to fill in the names again and provide all these ID cards and all this. It's all there. And we've done the first phase already. Now we're getting the second phase, and we're seeking funding support. And shortly we will be coming around to the communities, donors to promote this, so that we should be able to help speed up the process, because that's one of the frustrations of new business that want to establish. They find it very, very hard to do that. So that's one of the things. I think for the last question, what I think the institution need to do more is basically partner with the, Yumi Walk. We recently have the canoe race and all this. For VFC, I'm already thinking that we should set up side budget. Basically, if you pick your winner or second or something like that, we can say we can sponsor your license. Somebody with a brilliant idea, automatically we just automatically can give you the license. It is part of the way that we can work together to help new ideas, new business to grow. And I think the last point I want to touch on is the strong collaboration between all institutions. We need to cross-check each other and help each other on the way forward. We talk about SME. Dr. Michael spoke about that. But at VFSC, we have this personal property security register. It is an initiative driven by ADB, but we see the traction is not there. We've moved from the bill of sale, which is very expensive, now to the PPSR, which makes it very easy for, you can actually register movable assets to be able to access finance. But yet, we don't see a big traction. And it shows that we need to go out and educate more, get into the market and create programs that, help people to know the benefits of all this. And I think I was just discussing with my staff, and I think it's time now that we sit and review how the PPSR has contributed to this, because the drive was for more access. But the fact that not many people are using it, it shows that perhaps we need to reposition the facility. So I think the list, there's more to do, but that's what I can say for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Branan. I'm pretty excited about the one-stop shop. I'm sure most of us are. If we could have one-stop shops at most institutions, it'll make our lives easier. It'll also mean that we're minimizing cost to our businesses, standing in queues. We've all experienced that. So glad to hear the progress that VFSC is making. And I think the key point that I picked out of that conversation, or that the points that Branan raised, is collaboration and cohesiveness. No man is an island on their own. And this is why I pointed out earlier that it is so good to know that we are not alone. We've got Marla who's here to share her experiences, and I'm sure for the first time for the academics in the room, the students, you get to meet your commissioner of the VFSC for the first time, your acting deputy governor for the first time, and someone who represents you on the VCCI. It is so important to keep this dialogue going and also keeping it real. And that's my role as the moderator, to have some of those real conversations, and I'm looking forward to opening time to Q&A. But before that, I had some thoughts around the National Sustainable Development Plan, or the People's Plan 2030. So this plan was an intense consultation with the public. It was supposed to be from the 2016 until 2030. We now have 5 years until the plan, the end of the plan. There is the annual development reporting mechanism that they use. You touched on a point around committees and attendance. That struck a note with me because we have plans, so many plans, but who is taking the action? And who is accountable for the actions that are being taken or to be taken? I was listening to Marla's Straight Talk yesterday and also to some of her podcasts around leadership and accountability. So I want to touch a bit on that, and probably, Marla, we've come a long way. We've done a lot of things to help our country in terms of the economy, restoring, recovering. We've been through so many disasters. If we're not prepared to attend committees that do monitor and take actions as leaders, what would be your suggestions in terms of leadership and accountability? Because me as a citizen and everyone else as a citizen in this country should be able to hold our leaders accountable to the actions of the National Sustainable Development Plan, but also, do we take stock and stop, or do we continue? What would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thanks for that, Wilma. How many of you have had report cards that you bring home from school at the end of the term to your parents? How many? Come on, don't be shy. Branan, you've had a report card. What does that report card do for you? It's something that makes you feel proud of if you've done well, but also it makes you recognize where you have room for improvement. And it holds you accountable to your teachers, to your parents, for the work that you've done for the past term, right? In the Caribbean, from my observation, the only country that has made significant progress in the last 12 years, 15 years, has been Jamaica. And there are lots of reasons why Jamaica has made progress, but one of what I think is the most fundamental reason why Jamaica has made the kind of progress it has made is because they created an institution for accountability that looks at what the government says it's going to do and holds the government to account for doing what it says it's going to do. So, for example, you have a people plan, and by the way, I want to congratulate the authorities and the people of Vanuatu for having this people plan, because most countries in the Caribbean do not have any such plan. And if you don't have a plan, then where are you going? You're dealing with whatever lands in your inbox every day, as opposed to having a destination in mind, right? So it's great that you have this plan. In my country, we had something called Vision 2020 that, like you said, involved so much consultation to come up with this plan about what we wanted our country to look like in 2020. Guess what? 2020 came and went, and none of it was achieved. Simply because it's nice to have a plan, but if you don't have an action plan and you don't have accountability for who is supposed to do what, by when, then a lot of that plan just stays on paper. So when Jamaica, basically like you have had many crises, some of them natural, some of them man-made, they came to a point in 2011 or so where the government ran out of money. In economics, we say a balance of payments crisis, right? They ran out of money, could not pay their debts, could not pay the salaries of their public sector workers. And they kept coming to the banks and asking, can you give me a little loan so that I can pay salaries this Friday? And the banks would lend them the money. But then it kept happening over and over, and nothing was changing. And so at one point, the bank said, you know what, that's it. We're not lending you any more money. You need to go to the IMF. You need to declare that you have a balance of payments crisis. And you need to come up with what is called a reform agenda, basically, an economic reform agenda. And this reform agenda tells you, well, you need to balance your budget, you need to reduce your debt, you need to work on improving ease of doing business, all the policy measures. But instead of just having these policy measures, which is what you have basically in your people plan, what Jamaica did was these banks, the Chamber of Commerce, the opposition, the civil society, came together and created a committee which is independent of government, but which the government sits on. And this committee held the government to account for implementing the policy agenda, which basically is like your people plan. And the chairman of the Economic Program Oversight Committee, EPOC, on a quarterly basis, so every 3 months, he will come to the people, he will literally sit on the corner at the rum shop and explain to the people of Jamaica, well, these are the things they said they were going to do. These are the things they got an A in, they got a B in, they got an F. And so every 3 months, they had a report card that was shown to the people publicly, in person, as well as it was put on their website, on social media, on the news, etc., etc. And the thing is, the committee, that EPOC, is a representative of the broader society. Like I said, you have Chamber of Commerce, you have the central bank, you have the private sector, you have public sector, you have opposition, etc. So it's not any one vested interest that's holding the government to account. It's everybody collectively holding to the government to account. And that mechanism had been in place in Jamaica for over 12 years. And based on that mechanism, Jamaica has been able to see results because they hold the government to account every quarter, every 3 months, and they deliver this scorecard, this report card to the public every 3 months. Of course, some people in the public service initially didn't like it, and they say, oh my God, you're embarrassing me because we didn't do this or we didn't do that. Well, okay, we embarrass you, but maybe you need to do better next time. When you come home with an F on your report card, you're embarrassed, right? Well, at least some of us are, you know. So yeah, it might be embarrassing, but you know, you need to do better. But to your question, Wilma, about, you know, we have a plan that we came up with in 2016. Is it still relevant today in 2025? That plan has to be a living document. It has to be that every quarter when you come to the people, if there is something there that isn't making sense anymore because we've just had an earthquake or because we've just had some other disaster, then the plan for the next 3 months can't be the same that we had before the disaster. So that it has to be a living document. And so that committee is also responsible for making sure that the targets on the report card are relevant and kept up to date so that we're not on a plan that makes no sense anymore. We're on a plan that makes sense, that's relevant for us today. And I have to tell you, I've been talking about this all over the Caribbean for the past few years. The chairman of the EPOC, his name is Keith Duncan. He's the president of Jamaica, one of Jamaica's biggest banks, JMMB Bank. His ears might be ringing because I call his name all the time. I've done an interview with him. It's on my YouTube channel. The title of it is Big Things Are Gone in Jamaica. Have a look at the interview where he explains how this came about and how powerful it has been for Jamaica. And I really think, I mean, I've been talking all over the Caribbean about this. I really am passionate about how transformative this institution really that they've created. It costs nothing. It's just a committee of people that meets every quarter. How powerful this institution has been for Jamaica, and I think it can be for any country and every country, including Vanuatu.
Thank you, Marla. What an excellent proposition. And in the word of John Maxwell, everything rises and falls with leadership. We are all leaders in the room, and I'm sure we have a great interest and passion for our country, how we recover, how we restore back the economy that has since gone down somewhat. But we continue to be resilient, but resilient into action. And in the last sentences in our National Sustainable Development Plan, it actually says, to achieve our national vision, the words on these pages must translate into action on the ground, in villages and urban centers across the country. Those are the final words in the plan. And so the reason why I asked that question was that it is really good time that we stop and reflect on whether these plans are still relevant. Do we need to rethink them? Do we need to reprioritize? Do we need to reposition? But they're our plans, they belong to us. And I like how Marla talked about accountability. Simple things, I think sometimes we implement things that overcomplicate ourselves and we end up don't implementing them, or they're not as effective. I am now taking stock of time, and I will probably have to open up to the Q&A to our audiences in the room. We also have our live streaming audiences, so I'm looking around to see if there are any questions. Please, may I remind you, ask respectable questions that will contribute to the growth of our economy or some meaningful actions. So I open the floor now for Q&A. Thank you, Milroy, for the first question.
Good afternoon, moderator, and good afternoon, all people who listen up here, plus all panelists. I'm asking question, Islama or English?
Both, whichever.
Okay, English. Thank you for raising the term crisis. Marla, thank you for coming. I watched a lot of your videos 2 years ago. When no one is mentioning your name, I used to watch your videos. Yeah. Yes, I watch a lot of your videos, so I've got some prior knowledge of what you are saying, and I know that you're going to say more in Vanuatu. Lisa mentioned something about crisis. You know, they say crisis solves crisis. That's the statement I'd like to raise this afternoon. Crisis solves crisis. The COVID-19 crisis solves something in Vanuatu. That is, it creates the opportunity of pushing businesses like VBTC and government services online, because you know they put restriction on mobility, and then the government goes online to do business, as well as the private sector. There is another crisis called cyclone. Cyclone solves housing crisis by forcing people to build resilient houses and starting to adopt the adaptation, climate change, resilience, all these big jargons we used to hear on climate change. The earthquake came and solved one massive crisis, that is building code and building standard in Vanuatu. That's why they recently passed the building code standard. Now we're going to adopt legislation that have been sleeping for so many years. Now, first parliament sitting of this year, they made it into law. So all this crisis solves crisis. Now the Reserve Bank and VBTC mentioned something about blacklisting, something to do with blacklisting, AML, and you know all this KYC, know your customer, AML, anti-money laundering. EU blacklisting is a crisis. for the banking sector, for the financial sector in Vanuatu. What does it solve in Vanuatu? You know, I mentioned something about the opportunity that COVID-19 gave us, cyclone, the opportunities that the cyclone and the earthquake and so many other disasters gave to Vanuatu. We benefit from that. What benefits? What is this blacklisting crisis solves for Vanuatu? What can we draw out from it so that we stop talking about it? Because I've kept on reading it on the newspaper and we're hearing it on the television and everywhere. And Vanuatu is popularly known in Europe for its very weird financial things happening here. So I want to know what opportunity that will come out from this EU blacklisting. Is it going to be until Jesus comes back, or is it going to be solved early? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Milroy, for the question. And it is a good question. I stated at the start of the press club, every crisis presents an opportunity. So I will hand over to my panelist, Marla. Thoughts?
Sorry for rushing to answer. I like that. Every crisis creates a solution. I love it. Here's the solution. How many of you have heard of the United Nations Tax Convention? All right. So as of last year, I think, all countries that are members of the United Nations have come together and have agreed that we will come up with a global tax governance framework that takes away the OECD's Pillar 1, Pillar 2 global minimum tax nonsense, right? Basically, we did not have a voice at the OECD, but they get to impose on us that we have to have BEPS and base erosion, profit shifting, and economic substance rules, and global minimum tax, and Pillar 1, Pillar 2, and so on. But right now, there is a negotiation taking place at the United Nations under the UN Tax Convention negotiations, where we all have a voice as members of the United Nations to come to the table and help shape what the new global tax governance framework will look like. Now, they have also included in the language not just tax, but illicit financial flows, which means that it includes AML, CFT. Okay, so it's not just going to do away with OECD, but likely FATF as well in terms of the governance around illicit financial flows. It is very, very, very important that we show up at these negotiations, that we come prepared to negotiate, and that we vote at these negotiations. I have been very disappointed in the last year or so, more than a year, to see that many of my Caribbean countries don't always show up to vote. I have noticed Vanuatu, Fiji, Samoa, and other countries in the Pacific don't always show up to vote. And that's not a responsible way to approach this, because when they end up with a framework that we don't like, we can't complain if we didn't show up, okay? So I think it's important for the authorities to be very conscious of the negotiation process and the various events that they have to show up at to negotiate, but also most importantly to vote, because you have very powerful countries that are trying to block this convention from moving forward. You have the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, Canada, I think Australia, New Zealand, and many EU countries that are also, because they want the OECD's Pillar 1, Pillar 2 to be the one that we all have to adopt. But the OECD's governance framework is not inclusive. We were not at the table, and we matter, right? So that's the solution. The UN Tax Convention will be the solution. We have to be there to show up and make sure that our voices are heard at this negotiation.
Thank you, Marla. As Branan is wanting to add to the comments, I think you heard what Marla said, have a voice, be intentional, and this is why we also spoke about being present, holding our leaders accountable to the action plans that they have given us. We have voted in our leaders, we should hold them accountable. And we do that by having a voice and by being intentionally present at forums where our voice is actually represented. Over to you, Branan.
Thank you. I think that's a very good recommendation. When we spoke, I think it is, we have the DG now, George Mannery, who has been with EU, so it brings the exposure from what's happening there. But we also have our ambassador in New York, so I think the message is going to go to him. But I'd like that point, you know, the crisis came up, and I would like to say, before when they did the assessment, we were not ready. We didn't know what the assessment is. They just brought in anybody from, you know, from the department, come and answer this question. But now we are going through the rigorous process of really preparing ourselves. And now that the process we are at is completing the national risk assessment. It is our report that basically evaluate our risk. Previously, it was done in a way that we felt that it was people who really don't know what our country is going through. We don't have terrorists here, we don't have all this, and yet because we are unable to respond properly, they said, oh, we can just conclude Vanuatu is. What do we get? Because we are rated very high, and we have all these checklists. Have you completed this? Have you completed this? And because we don't do that, they said they don't care, so we continue to maintain our status. But now, we have stepped up in our effort, and I'm pleased that, I know they keep on shifting goalposts and all this, but we have engaged consultant, and now we have given this draft copy to the industry. James will attest to that, and everybody to contribute. It's a bit of a short notice, but at least we are engaging, and we are trying to really present our case where it will reduce our risk. If we get a good rating, low, we should be able to pass, but you never know what's happening, and I would still go with what Marla is saying. We'll look at alternatives that we need to support.
We can do both.
Okay.
We can do both, absolutely. Thank you for that. I shall open more time for one or two more questions. Yes, sir. Question in the front, please.
Thank you. Ian Kerr, small businessman in Vanuatu. First of all, I'd like to make a quick comment. Vanuatu has a constitution. In our constitution, there is a list of fundamental duties for each and every person. And I've talked to a lot of people, nobody knows what they are. If we really want to create resilience, we need to know what are our fundamental duties to ourselves and to the country and to other people. So, very important point. The next one is economic freedom. In our constitution, there is nothing about the government running businesses. Now, some of our disasters are man-made, and these could be eliminated if we stopped government running businesses. So I just want to lead into that, Marla. I'd like to ask you a question. Can you define economic freedom, and can you explain why it's such an important foundation stone for economic resilience? And just to add from that, why are these non-governmental international organisations so hell-bent on taking away our economic freedom?
Oh boy. Yeah, I can't comment on international organizations wanting to take away your freedom. I'm not aware of that. Maybe I need to do a little more research, so I can't comment on that. But what is economic freedom? I mean, of course, being on these blacklists is a mechanism of restricting that freedom. I mentioned at an earlier forum with the students that one of the most important ways that the blacklist affects not just your country, my country, is the only other country besides Vanuatu that's blacklisted twice by the EU. Only the two of us, Vanuatu and Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the ways, the most important ways that it affects us is that it makes payments into your country from outside, as well as payments from your country to outside, makes it very difficult, costly, time-consuming. A simple thing like paying my kids' school fees, you know, sometimes it takes weeks for wire transfers to go through, because when it hits an American bank and they see it's coming from Trinidad and Tobago, which is blacklisted, they then ask all kinds of questions, including what size shoe you wear. You know, and the thing is, the banks are not doing this because they want to. They don't enjoy asking all of these questions, but because of the fact that the country is on this list, the regulator demands that they ask many, many more questions, and so it just takes longer and it costs more. So that restricts our economic freedom. How do you define economic freedom? Of course, it's, to me, being independent, not just politically independent, but having food security, fuel security. To me, those are the things that give you freedom. I know in Vanuatu, you do a lot of agriculture. I just came from a week in Fiji, and my driver there said, you know what, in Fiji, food is free. Nobody goes hungry in Fiji, and I thought, wow, what a blessing that is, to not have hunger in your country. I mean, in my country, we do have hunger, and in many countries in the Caribbean, because we don't produce, some countries don't produce any food, and that has to do with the quality of the soil, and their coral, so they don't have good soil, and droughts and so on. So I think that economic independence really comes from economic freedom comes from being independent in terms of your food, in terms of your fuel in particular. And again, I go back to having a sovereign wealth fund where you have a piggy bank with something in there that, should you be faced with a crisis, you have something that means you don't have to go begging and borrowing from your development partners. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Marla. Before Dr. Michael steps in, we've only got a few minutes left of this press club session, so I'm just putting you up to notice. Do we have questions? Okay, maybe we'll take questions from the floor first before I come back to the panel for final words. I think we've got the gentleman in the corner who has been raising his hands. Thank you for your patience. Okay, we've got our time going, so maybe we'll take another question at the front. And as we're talking about economic freedom, it comes down to the individuals that are in the room. There was also a point that I picked up from Mr. Kerr at the front talking about our constitution. Unfortunately, in our schools, we do not currently have curriculum that is based on, talks about our history, the Vanuatu history, in our education systems. But as students in the room, please make it your personal interest to know your constitution. Identity, knowing who you are so you can contribute meaningfully to the policies that have been made in the country. I've also heard Marla speak about it, but if you're 18 years old and you have an opportunity to make your voice heard, please make it heard, yeah? Cast your vote, make sure your voice is heard. Do we have the microphone? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Lorenzo from the Vanuatu Foreign Investment Promotion Agency. We mainly deal with all the foreign direct investors coming to do investment. So I would like to just provide some, data in regards to the contribution of FDIs, specifically around our agency's registry. So currently, the dominant sector that actually remain as one of the dominant sector in Vanuatu dealing with FDIs is the services sector, which contribute around 83%. And time we talk about the FDI, we talk about all foreigner where staff come invest in Vanuatu, providing jobs, where most Vanuatu citizens in work them, and they provide 900 jobs for mostly Nivans where only work. And I think that's the dominant sector at the moment, where FDIs contributed at the moment, around 80%. So my question to the panelists, whether Marla you can answer, do you see an opportunity where government can tap more into those services sectors? When you talk about it, services sectors includes accommodation, financial and insurance activities, and information and communication as well, like a colleague here mentioned, and even real estate activities. And it's growing now, especially when we have foreign direct investments coming in and contribute mostly in those services sectors or these different types of industries. I think that's what I'm.
Thank you for the question. Over to the panel. How can the government encourage or promote FDIs investing into the country? I think that was your question, Lorenzo.
Thank you. I think my colleagues here would come up with a suggestion, but I think Vanuatu as an offshore center, it's unique compared to Solomon Islands, PNG, and others. We are blessed natural resources, but also we attract a lot of foreign investment into the country because of our status. That's a very good point that you've mentioned, and how the government should support FDI coming in based on this contribution into the economy. But I agree, but from what VBTC is seeing, there is a support from what we are doing in terms of the products that we offer, financial dealers license, and also the future asset service provider bill that was passed recently. This is a big business that is going to attract a lot of business from overseas. And if some of you have been watching the Parliament session, that very technical bill and detailed bill was just passed like that. It shows the government's commitment. And I think sitting at the back, we have the former Minister of Finance. He's one of, John Salong has been one of the main contributors to that. And it shows the commitment of the government to really support this. And I've vindicated that at the moment, for the financial dealers, it employs over 100 Nivan. And I think the classic case is agency, Titan FX. All the stuff from Titan FX, can you stand here? Can you raise your hand? These are the foreign investment into the country, physical presence, and directly employ Vanuatu. And we've been sitting with all the schools telling them, we need to, this is an industry that has a lot of potential for Vanuatu. Just imagine if we have 12 of that. At the moment, we have licensed over 70. And if the government position itself well, we're going to have a big pressure on accommodation, food, and everything. You look at a small economy like Cyprus, similar to Vanuatu, where it depended only on service sector and particularly tourism. Now you go there, you see all this high-rise building, a lot of young people that are, motivated to work in the corporate. And we have run 2 symposiums already. This year we're going to just a bit of change there. But if we get all this investment in to meet the physical presence, I think this small Vanuatu will be enough, because it's going to be quite an impact on it. But for the other sectors, I think, I don't know, I don't have any experience with that, but perhaps it's some of my colleagues can say in terms of real estate and all these others.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to step in there because that is part of the topic around diversification. And it's not only to do with FDIs, it's really what I talked about earlier in terms of challenging our mindset around status quo and complacency. So if we keep doing the same things over and over, we cannot expect a different outcome. I will now probably hand over to, and I apologize because we are running out of time. I will hand over to Lisa to just probably contribute to that last question.
I just wanted to add really quickly, quick way of FDI, tourism. The money comes in from abroad and it's constant. Every person that comes off that plane, without even getting into real estate and what it's gonna cost to bring in and to rebuild all of that.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll take one last question, I think from the top, and then we will have to close off on this session because we are really running out of time. I've also got to do my job as the moderator and keep us to time. That's so important. So I think there's a question there, Donna.
Thank you, moderator. I'll make this quick. So my question is just with regards to financial inclusion, which Dr. Hililan spoke about earlier. And my question goes towards that mention of the microinsurance policy that you mentioned. So I just wanted to talk about how difficult it is to get insurance in Vanuatu. Even for personal reasons, like if I want to get housing insurance, it's very hard for me to get cyclone cover, which is something that I don't really understand because we have a lot of cyclones, Category 5 in Vanuatu, and for some reason, the insurance underwriters, they don't give us that insurance cover. And, I'm very well educated. I work, I have a really good job, and I can't get it. My question to you, Dr. Hililan, is if I can't get insurance, how will other people who don't have a job or who won't be able to get access to loans from banks? Because usually if you want to get a loan, you have to have insurance, right? So my question, maybe to the panel, not just Dr. Hililan, but how can we fix this for people in Vanuatu? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I couldn't agree more. We ran surveys and found that not only households but businesses, micro, small, those small businesses are not insured, and not only that, but also the ability to access or to know what an insurance, to know what insurance basically is not out there, and that's sad because we are the most vulnerable country in the world, or one of them, and so it really is something that's prevalent in society in Vanuatu, and during one of the cyclones recently led to this parametric insurance facility that I talked of also not being able to be offered in Vanuatu. I noticed that some of these products are available in smaller island economies in the Pacific, and so it made me wonder whether we must be doing something wrong, or that we need to work on this further and have it in place, because it's all about resilience. And we need both the business sector and the household sector to be resilient, one of which is to have insurance cover. And the other thing also is, if you noticed, is that, because Vanuatu has had several catastrophes that have been a number of insurance companies are also being sold or being taken up by other insurance companies from the Pacific. And so there's a shift in the industry itself. I think that I cannot basically provide any advice or on what a person should do, but I think that this is an issue that is out there. I know that insurance, we do have insurance cover available, and for example, I do have insurance cover of my house. And that is related, I'm saying this because it's related to what you brought up. It's very important to the fact that you need this to work to be able to say if you want your business to access a loan, to expand investment, you need that insurance cover out there. So it is a problem. And I think that we must look at ways to address it, and it should be done quite quickly.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Michael, and thank you, Donna, for the question. We talked about taking action, so I think one of my suggestions, acting governor, as the issuing body that issues insurance certificates, may I suggest, in terms of collaborating and cohesiveness in taking action, that the Reserve Bank do take it on as an action on why is there differentiation between issuance of insurance to businesses, to those who are working, those who are not. It is so critical in terms of our resilience and being prone to natural disasters. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so I will now give the panel just a few minutes to just share your last words before I wrap up this afternoon.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to say, despite all the challenges we are talking about, I'd say Vanuatu, it's an exciting time.
Yes.
We need to look positive. We still have our partners that are supporting us. There's a lot of potential. I've said that Vanuatu financial system is unique, and I think we need all the collaboration. And it's very pleasing to see that we are attracting and engaging, people like Marla and others. VBTC will partner with others to continue all the symposiums that are coming up. And I'm sure in 10 years' time, it will be a different picture. I'm looking forward to Vanuatu being one of the main promoter of Expo, where we get all the big business to Vanuatu, to come to Vanuatu to see the beauty while doing business. So let's be hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you, Branan.
I'm disappointed the time's already up. I had a lot of questions, especially for Marla, in public, but hopefully we can grab you afterwards. I think I'll just wrap up by saying there's some great frameworks, but let me tell you what that translation is on the ground. Financial inclusion and digitalization is great, but we need internet. We want access to markets, cargo or passengers, but we need connectivity. So I think there's a lot of basics that have to be addressed at the same time. I'm not saying one after the other, but at the same time to find that balance so that we really work on the cost of doing business in Vanuatu, which is horrific. Let's not even mention solar tax or things that are not contributing to us moving forwards in a sustainable manner, but really encourage us to work on that balance from a framework perspective, but also on the day-to-day actions. And also, there's been a lot of focus, understandably, completely understandably, on Port Vila after the earthquake, because it's also where the CBD and the financial hub is. But if we are talking about recovery, and we want this to not drop on the next crisis, it has to include the whole of Vanuatu. It has to include the rest of the 82 islands that are included in the archipelago. I'd just really like to stress on that, highlight on the fact that tourism is one of the easy ways, one of the quick ways of moving forward as we balance out all the rest of the frameworks. So just thanking again everybody and encouraging everybody, blong, Yumi stand up.
Indeed, yes. So in concluding, I would just like to say, first of all, you have a lot going for you. And there's a lot that you need to be proud of in Vanuatu. You have a very safe society. I come from the Caribbean, where the top 10 countries with the highest homicide rates, we are half of them. And that's not something to be proud of at all. You have a very safe society. You're very high, I think #1 this time on the Happy Place Index. That's also something to be very proud of. You have a new prime minister who I spoke to on, I think, Tuesday morning, who is very passionate about accountability and transparency. I've not seen anything like that at all. So that's also something to be proud of. You have a people plan, which is something that might need some reform, but you at least have something to start with that you can build on and build accountability and accountability mechanism on top of that. Basically, you need institutions, you need infrastructure, you need investment, and then you need ideas and innovation. Those are I would say, the 4 main ingredients in making economic progress, and these are the things that you can focus on. Happy to have much more discussions before I leave on April 29th, and thank you so much for coming out and for supporting. And Yumi Stand Up, big up to Yumi Stand Up. Thank you.
And for me, I like you stand up hashtag. It goes to the center of what we do, macroeconomic stability for Vanuatu, as well as our people, so that we can prosper. And we will continue to do that. We will continue to play that role. Of course, we are challenged. We have a technology that are coming through, and we need to embrace it. We need to, like the audience says, innovate. And I think we need also to reach out to all sectors of the economy, to the people of Vanuatu, and bring services and products to our people in Vanuatu. We'll continue to do that, but thank you for having me here. Thank you very much.
Thank you to my panelists for your final words. We can dissect the economy, identify the issues and challenges, possible approaches, but one thing we know is that a nation's success depends on the collaboration and cohesiveness of all sectors working together in harmony to truly make it happen and impact our people from the highest level to our mamas and papas in the villages. I hope that you have thought about what your personal contribution is, whether you're a student, you're in employment, or you come as a representative from an organization. We all have the ability to make a difference and have a voice. And I hope that it has also stirred up some thinking so that you can go back to your families and start talking about this is not only the government's responsibilities. If we are part of the system, then we do have accountability to make the system work. So I think on behalf of the panel and myself as your moderator, thank you for making time to being here this afternoon. I would also like to acknowledge the FMA and the FCA for putting funds towards bringing Marla across to Vanuatu. She's traveled far, but I truly hope that the rest of your stay here is eventful and that you're enlightened more about our beautiful island nation, Vanuatu. Thank you, everybody, and have a nice rest of the afternoon and rest of the week.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.